What this trial is about is claims for false imprisonment, assault and damage to property, and the main issues are, were the police entitled to make the arrests that they did make on the 1st of June 1985, particularly the arrests of these 26 plaintiffs? If they were, did they use unlawful force in making those arrests? And did they commit acts of unlawful damage to people's vehicles and property, both at the time of the arrests and later?
This is the front of the convoy. There are 150 vehicles behind me. The women and children have been left at Savernake Forest. They're all heading for Stonehenge. That's 18 miles away.
I wasn't aware of it at the time that it took place, but I later became aware that really the whole of the Wiltshire establishment had sat down to decide what to do about the convoy. And this involved various landowners and the county council and the police and their solicitors. And it was a question really for them that they didn't want these people coming into Wiltshire and occupying the area around Stonehenge, but there wasn't really a law that enabled them to keep the convoy out. So it was a question of taking advice to find some kind of legal cloak to throw around the operation which they wanted to launch. And so they came up with this business of the civil injunctions to justify all that then happened. And it seems to me still highly questionable whether what happened was really lawful.
We're prepared for any contingency which may arise, and although I've told you how many men I've got available, I've also got maximum cooperation of my neighbouring chief constables that they're prepared to assist me if I require that aid.
I think a few people were aware of this thing called a High Court injunction, but people just felt that if they did come across the police that probably they would be advised or forcefully told to go somewhere else, and that's what they would do, and then everything would still be all right. But nobody had the slightest idea of the ambush, capture and violence that was intended.
Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing gonna be alright.
Negotiations started with the police, and they were not prepared to let us go on any further, and in fact we were to hand ourselves in, or they'd be bothered. Well, we told them there and then that there's no way were people going to hand themselves in, and then the order was sent out by the high-ranking bobby to arrest all the drivers. And of course, this line of riot bobbies had shot out along down the side of us and started smashing in the windows.
I was sort of alert and thinking, oh, what's going to happen now, you know, and I just watched them go down the side of the vehicle up ahead. And I could see this going as they were coming down the side, and I'm thinking, oh, well, you know, for crying out loud, what's going on here? I went, no, and screamed up, just tell me what you want me to do. And I reached all over the windscreen like this, because he was there first, and then he was hitting there, and then this one here was hitting at the window, and I put my hands up against the window here, and I said, just tell me what you want me to do. And there's a crash and a bang, a wallop from behind me, and there's shouting, and they're banging on the sides of the ambulance, and they're shouting.
One of the police reached in through that broken side window, the passenger window, and grabbed a handful of hair. I couldn't see clearly into the vehicle from where I was standing. I was some little distance off, but it was very clear to me that he had hold of the top of her hair and was pulling very vigorously. She, of course, was screaming blue murder, not wanting to be pulled, because what she was being pulled through was a window that had been broken 10 seconds earlier, which was framed as broken glass.
We knew there would be a confrontation. I'm hoping that we'll get through the day without too many people being injured, either policemen or peace convoy, or the people in the field.
Has the operation gone as you expected?
Yes, I think so.
You bastards! Can you see? Get it on the pipeline!
During the 1970s, the late 70s, more and more people started to live on vehicles. Previous to that, most people had lived in benders or teepees and just used the vehicles to transport themselves and their possessions from one place to another. But eventually it became obvious that it would be good to actually live in the vehicles themselves. And during the years of between 1979 and 1982 or 3, the numbers of people living in vehicles increased by a huge proportion. Because it did seem a sensible way of life, and obviously when there are a lot of people living like that, it would also make sense for them to move from one place to another together. But this was no more than just people who enjoyed the same lifestyle wanting to be with their friends. It wasn't done in a way that, as the police might say, that people deliberately did it just to make some sort of opposition or a force or an army in some way to, you know, it was in no way that at all. It was just simply people who had the same values and the same lifestyle, wanting to be with people who shared those values.
Well, the People's Free Festival wasn't originally at Stonehenge. The early People's Free Festivals were in Windsor Great Park, just outside Windsor Castle. They were the idea of a man called Bill Dwyer, who latched on to the idea of big music festivals. I mean, this was just after Woodstock and all the big festivals in the States and the big commercial ones at the Isle of Wight. And he wanted a big free festival, and he wanted it in the Queen's back garden. And for 3 years, people got away with the People's Free Festival at Windsor. And then the police put a stop to it.
We were attempting to say that festivals were good for the heart and the soul of the country, you know, that they were really good things, that they were cheap holidays, that actually that a lot of inner city problems could be solved just by allowing people to come out in the countryside and actually have a good time.
I mean, the police say that, you know, there was people throwing petrol bombs and stuff like this. I never actually seen any of our lot throwing petrol bombs. What I did see was quite a few people that felt very intimidated and very frightened after having their homes smashed. And quite a few people have been beat up at this stage by the police and arrested and taken away, and some were still with us that had been beaten up.
You all right, that with your hand? What's wrong with it? What's happened? Possibly a fractured skull. What happened? Go on, a few lads, get on! Get this man out of here comfortable. When you're ready, lift it. Yeah. Bastards. Kingston, you know, is that there? Fucking watching this. Find the barbed wire. Take care of him now. Is this one else kicking up on the road?
Tell you what, we'll get somebody to tell her, okay? We'll get somebody to tell her that you are hurt here. You're taking it, okay?
Yeah.
What happened to you?
I hit me a police truncheon.
Where?
In the arm. Broke my arm.
What were you doing?
Up here, I was just standing, so I watched to see what was going on. They charged on. One of them hit me with a truncheon.
You ought to come in and get it checked over anyway, at least.
Well, we haven't done anything, have we?
Going on the A303.
Just trying to live our lives, that's all.
We don't interfere with anyone else.
And this world's supposed to be a common treasury for everybody to share, not people to
free
button
land.
up. You know what I mean? No wonder people are starting to get sick. These people are pushing our people too close. And, like, it's going to start to explode one of these days if they don't watch it.
This whole thing is just a total farce.
Cities are going crazy, everybody's going crazy, and it's all because of this. They're trying to impose a police state. Well, we're free thinkers and we're going to stay that way,
What
no
right
matter
have
what.
they got to tell us what
Whether
to
they
do?
shoot me or not, I don't care. Then go for it.
Why don't you go to hospital?
Well, we don't want to be split up. We don't want to be
leave my
arrested.
husband, my dog, my puppies and my home.
Like, we don't want to be arrested. If we leave here, we'll get arrested and split up. She'll be taken one place, I'll be taken another. We'll probably lose our home. Like, we'll have no livelihood, nowhere to live. We just want to get off this field as peacefully and quietly as we can. And this lot, all these coppers are just here for one reason, and that's to cause trouble. I mean, I don't want to cause trouble. I ain't gonna cause trouble. I ain't got a stick or anything. I just want to go. Just go quiet, so the baby can be born. I have a decent start in life, not surrounded by 1,000 coppers with sticks and shields.
Stonehenge was just the excuse. They knew how strongly we all felt about Stonehenge and knew that was a good reason. But the real reason was the threat to the state. As I said, the growth of people, the numbers of people was doubling every year. For 4 years, well, that was a huge number of people that was suddenly flocking into buses or whatever and living on the road. And the festival itself, once it became to be a month long, it functioned perfectly well. It had its own economy, it had its own system for everything, and was so successful in that sense that it must have been a huge threat to the state. It was anarchy in action, and it worked, and it was seen to be working. And it was seen to be working by so many people that they wanted to do it too and wanted to be a part of it.
And things changed at Stonehenge when things changed in society generally, and when the view of the government and the view of policing changed. And we came to a situation where the police had to be in charge always, all the time, of everything. And people who didn't do what the police wanted them to do, you know, had to be made to do it. And whatever resources it took to do that would be forthcoming.
The state, both local, national, local council, police, they have spent literally millions. I mean, if the number flashed up here at the moment, you know, would it be 100 million? Would it be 200 million? I don't know. They sound like impossible sums, but I bet they're low. I bet they're low on what they've spent in trying to destroy our culture because we're considered to be that much of a threat to the way they do business and the way they look at the world. Because with our culture in the ascendancy, they wouldn't be able to send troops to defend oil interests in the Middle East. And they know that. And they know that when we are actually showing what we can do in art, in culture, in politics, in creativity, in just being bloody human beings, when we actually are showing what we can do, this is very, very appealing to people. And it's very frightening to them. I don't know who the them are, because I don't see the them as a tiny group. I see the them as people who are frightened by the ideas.
And eventually, this dreadful man, Lionel Grundy, who was then the Assistant Chief Constable, arrived on the scene and made it quite clear that there were to be no negotiations and that everybody in the field was to be what he called arrested and processed.
Those of you that come out under those circumstances will be interviewed and dealt with.
In other words, you'll be locked up and dealt with.
If I suspect that you've been involved in some of the offences that have occurred today, then you would be arrested. Well, that's it. Now, wait a minute. I'm not here to bargain with you. I'm here to say something to you for you to consider. Now, you don't have to make an answer now. You can get through to me.
We want to go to Stonehenge.
Well, the Stonehenge Festival, as you know, has been cancelled this year.
And somebody, it wasn't me, said, well, that's crazy. If you had a couple of football hooligans in a football stadium, you wouldn't arrest everybody in the stadium just to get at the hooligans. But he wasn't interested in making any distinction between those he alleged had actually committed offences and the rest. He wanted everybody.
You had no right to stop us coming in this field. We're not at Stonehenge. We're not breaking any laws. We're not at Stonehenge. You had no right to stop us coming here, and you've no right to sit out there blaming us for the damage.
What's your reaction to what that police officer has asked you to do?
Well, I'm well upset about it. I mean, he's offered us naff all. Absolutely nothing. We'd like this alternative site. If they say we can't have this one, we would like the alternative. What they're asking us to do is hand ourselves into custody like we did at Nostell Priory and get ourselves fitted up on charges that we don't want. They fitted us up, loads of us, last year. Nobody's done anything about it. Now they're about to start doing it again. And we need help. We're genuine people just like yourselves, and we need help right now.
Yeah.
Please, help us, all of you. Help us, stand by us.
The word actually used was processed, and people had had past experience of what that word means. And it doesn't just mean arrested. I mean, people through their lifestyle get arrested on a day-to-day basis. That's just one of the facts of life, I'm afraid. It's no big deal being arrested. It's what happens in the process of that arrest that's really interesting, and what happens afterwards. And at a place called Nostell Priory in West Yorkshire the previous year, some of those present in the field had been present at this earlier incident where their homes had been systematically dismantled, and a decommissioning exercise had been attempted by the police to try and put this sort of thing down.
The main super duper comes over when they've actually surrounded us, and he's asking for Boris and Doris, who are the ringleaders, as far as he's concerned, because we'd billed ourselves as what was it, the peace convoy. That was, and it was headed by Boris and Doris, who were two geese that we had on site. So on all the fly posters it was, you know, Boris and Doris proudly present, you know, sort of thing. So they wanted to arrest Boris and Doris, and of course, you know, your arse is tweeting like nobody's business, because there's all this thing going on, and you know, and your gaffs are being wrecked right before you, and you're surrounded by all this please. And then the chief super duper marches up and he says, right, I want Boris and Doris to step out here now, as all 200 of us just fell about guffawing. I mean, you couldn't do anything else. You know, your horse is tweeting away one moment, and then there's this Looney Tooney asking for two geese to step forward, you know. Oh, that was extremely funny, that was. That was the funny moment of it all. Yeah. Wicked.
Take a miracle. Are you still there, boy?
They just started attacking the bus, and they were hitting the window, the driver's window, with an iron spike about 4 foot long or so, half an inch wide. I thought it was a fencing stake to start with, but it wasn't. It was too big for that, more like a crowbar. And eventually it did go through, and the windscreen, which had been caving in, finally broke, and I went back and sort of went like that because of the glass flying over, and the spike came through the window, and it was definitely quite frightening.
Out!
All right!
Stop!
We have
Stop!
babies in here, very small babies! Just wait! All right.
Let the ladies come out.
Can I
Bring the
just
ladies
talk
forward.
just a minute? I've got 3 babies in here.
Bring the ladies and children forward, please. Oh, just stop her. I didn't do anything, mate. They smashed me windows. They hit me on the head with truncheons. They hit me when I was on the floor. Come out, man. Come out, son. Come out. Come on, just calm down. On the deck! On the deck! No. On the deck! Now stretch your arms out. Stretch them out! Take her away. No! Don't argue.
You time to fuck it up!
How they did it, I don't know. They ripped these doors open, and then this one single riot bobby leapt in and stood on my bed and shouted at Third Eye Jim to get out. He let Third Eye Jim out. He shouted at Mick to get out, and as Mick got to the side door, this bobby smashed him right between the eyes with this huge riot stick. And of course Mick flew out the door backwards, and then he told me to do likewise, and of course I realised as soon as I moved over to the door he was going to hit me with this stick, which he did. As soon as I got to the door, sure enough, he went to hit me right between the eyes, the same place he hit Mick. And I covered my face like that, and this baton hit me on the elbow, and of course it sent me reeling out the door. And just as they'd got me onto the brow of the hill there, because that's where they was taking this particular lot that was left, these bobbies stopped me and forcibly spun me round and made me look. They said, "See that?" And I looked at my home, and there was smoke coming out the side doors, and they'd gone and set my home on fire. And stopped me and turned me round and made me look at my home. The flames coming and the smoke coming out the sides.
The rest of us had provoked the police simply by refusing to be arrested, refusing to be stopped. And so when it finally did slew into another vehicle and come to a halt, every officer in the field, it seemed to me, came crowding in on it. And they were like kind of flies around rotten meat. And there was no question of trying to make a lawful arrest or anything else. They just crawled all over that vehicle with truncheons flailing, hitting anybody they could reach. It was extremely violent and very sickening. And it was at that point that my photographer, who was trying to take pictures of it, got arrested. And I myself got threatened and told to leave.
When that boat is stopped, make sure the driver is well identified. He's on the This is national international news. Sorry. Come on, get on.
Someone help me! Help me! See what they're doing to us!
What we, the ITN camera crew, and myself as a reporter have seen in the last 30 minutes here on this field has been some of the most brutal police treatment of people that I've witnessed in my entire career as a journalist. There must be an inquiry. I don't know what the results will be of it, but at this stage, the number of people who've been hit by policemen, who've been clubbed whilst holding babies in their arms and in coaches around this field is still to be counted. What the end result will be, we don't know, but there must surely be an inquiry after what's happened here today.
When I got back to ITN during the following week, and I went to the library to look at all of the rushes, most of what I thought we'd shot was no longer there. And from what I've seen of what ITN has provided since then, it disappeared. And particularly some of the nastier shots that were taken of the battle in the Beanfield of the woman being dragged out by her hair, I know was filmed.
It turns out now, I didn't realise it at the time, but I was in fact the last person to be processed in Amesbury Police Station that night, and was the last one down as having been through. But in fact, being one of the first that was arrested at 7 o'clock meant that we were among the people that spent the most time in the garages round the back. And it was indeed a long time. We were there from probably 8 o'clock in the evening till well into 2 or 3 o'clock the following morning. So we were in the garages 6 or 7 hours, which is quite a long time to be kept standing waiting in the freezing cold. And that is the point at which we were strip searched too, so it was a most uncomfortable time really.
Some of the violence I saw, it was quite, I just don't know how to describe it, horrific, that a policeman should be doing this. And we're taught to, as fairly young children, to trust policemen. You don't expect them to go battering you. You don't expect them to batter children, but they were that day. And I want to show the whole world that policemen do that sort of thing occasionally. And then maybe people will believe it and try and stop it. It's only by the will of the general public that things like that can be stopped. And they don't just do it to us, they do it to lots of small groups. You know, anybody who's in a minority is going to get trashed one way or another, and this is wrong. You know, all this damage, I mean, about the only thing that works is the windscreen wipers. I haven't got a windscreen anymore. Oh, this is ridiculous.
The mass media is a joke, generally, and particularly where the travellers are concerned. There's two factors that work. One is that individually, reporters are scared of the convoy. They're afraid they're going to get mashed up or raped if they go close to them. So you've got ignorance. And the second thing is that on the face of it, the convoy looked like a good story, you see. What makes them a good story is that they fit a kind of cliche from Hollywood. They're crazed hippies. And if you put the ignorance and the cliche together, you stick with the cliche, you see, because you don't go close enough to them to discover they're not crazed hippies, but it makes good copy. And on the particular occasion of the battle in the Beanfield, so-called, most of the press succumbed to police knocking around. The police told them to stay down the bottom of the hill, out of the field, and the reporters agreed, which was crazy. The police had no legal right to keep the reporters out of the field, but they allowed themselves to be herded like sheep away from the field so that they didn't see what went on. So then when the police came down the hill afterwards and gave them a lot of complete guff that fitted into the cliche image of the crazed hippies, they bought it. And it's actually, in a way, you look at them and they're just a joke, but it becomes a pretty dangerous joke when prospective jurors and voters and people who should be angry about what happened get fed this kind of nonsense.
We took an important stand on the very first or the second day of the case, when the press started calling this the hippie trial, and that Lord Gifford was representing 24 hippies. And I just put my foot down and said this word is a racist word. It is a word which is derogatory. It is not accurate. And I don't think it should be used in this case. And I think the jury then began, and everyone else, began to see these people as individuals who had individual integrity, individual ideas about their lives and their children, and they began to see the justice of their case. and the injustice of the way they've been treated.
If I could say that the Beanfield and what happened to me that day was the worst day of my life, and I can't ever foresee having anything happen to me that could be worse than what happened to us there that day, then I can say that that day that I had in the witness box must be my best day of my life as a contrast, because it was such a good feeling to be able to stand up in public and say, no, this is how it happened, this is what happened to me, I'm telling the truth. And that did make me feel good.
Inconsistencies were two a penny. I mean, there were more than 100 police witnesses, and wherever more than one policeman saw the same event, the descriptions were completely different. And to some extent you expect that. And the things which surprised me were not so much the inconsistencies as the omissions, and how critical some of them turned out to be. For instance, on the police video, which turned out to be quite important, there is a piece missing. Nobody knows how large a piece. You know, estimates vary from a few seconds to more than a minute, where the tape, we're told, accidentally broke. But that is at the crucial point where the convoy stopped. In the police radio log, which we were provided with, there are breaks. There are breaks of a couple of minutes where the tape was changed.
Now, I've just read my arresting officer who arrested me. I've just seen his statement of how and what he says happened and where I came from, and it is complete and utter lies. Everything I'm being told in the court is lies and prejudice for their side. They're just going to try and get out of it as best as they can, it's obvious.
At the moment, the jury are considering their verdicts on allegations of strip searches. They'll then consider claims for damage to property and wrongful imprisonment. Kate Roberts, Coast to Coast, Winchester Crown Court. Great. Can you just give me one shot of the court? Just help me.
Now, the problem arose when the jury answered the first question about the intentions of the convoy at the beginning of the day in favour of the police, and the last question, and some of the earlier ones, about the intentions of the convoy later in the day in favour of the plaintiffs. But the judge wouldn't accept that verdict. And so eventually he said that he would pose another question to the jury.
And the way the questionnaire was written was, quite frankly, it was very much against us right from the word go. Our lawyers tried to change it, but they didn't succeed that well. They couldn't get the judge to clarify matters, and it was left so open that the judge was able to make the decision that he wanted to. The final question that clinched ours, question number 12, was, did members of the convoy still wish to force their way to Stonehenge at 7 o'clock in the evening?
And he put the jury in a terrible quandary. And the jury showed that they were in the quandary by sending a message to the judge saying, we are puzzled by the words members of the convoy. Does it mean all the members, or a few of the members, or a section of the convoy? And the judge had them in, and he said that it means any significant number. In a sense, anything more than 2 or 3. And that explains why, in the final result, the jury answered the question, yes, the police did reasonably believe that members of the convoy, some members of the convoy, still wanted to make trouble. And once they said that, the judge said, well, automatically, they're entitled to arrest everybody, and therefore the plaintiff's claim has failed, all of them. So that was it, and I wouldn't fret. I know full well that it leaves a very sour taste in the mouth. of both the jury and the plaintiffs, because they feel that they secured the verdict of the jury on the questions as they were put, with everyone's agreement. Then the judge changed the goalposts.
I was proved to have been assaulted by the policeman that arrested me, and I was awarded money for that assault, which was taken away in costs. And the policeman who assaulted me was promoted. That's British justice. That's exactly what happened. He got promotion and I'm still owing. I'm still in debt.
But I pursued a case in the High Court to say in the first place that I was unlawfully arrested. That I didn't do anything wrong. I had no intention of doing anything wrong. I was being a responsible citizen, doing my level best to stop people getting hurt and patching them up when they had. And I was arrested. After all of this, 6.5 years and several £1 million in legal costs, I have absolutely nothing to show for the wrong that the jury agreed had been done to me.
We've tried to use the system to right the wrongs, and it hasn't worked for us, so what are we left with? If the system doesn't help me right the wrongs, and there isn't no justice in the system, what am I expected to do? Armed struggle? Nah. Peaceful hippie. I just have to live my life quietly somewhere and carry on doing and being.
I think they'll probably learn a little bit. I don't think they'll learn a lot, to be quite honest. I mean, because, you know, the police are the police, aren't they? You know, they're pretty thick-skinned at the end of the day when all's said and done. No, I don't think they'll learn a lot. They'll learn a bit, certainly, but I don't think they'll learn a lot. No.
One of the big lies at the bottom of all this is that the people of Wiltshire didn't like the convoy. That isn't true in my experience. My family live in Wiltshire and did not want the police chasing these people out of the county. It isn't even true of the people who live close to Stonehenge. Like on that Saturday, as we were driving to the Stones, people were not hiding in their houses in fear. They weren't throwing rocks at the convoy to get them out of Wiltshire. They were waving. And it's just a typical piece of undemocratic behaviour that the Wiltshire establishment regarded these people as a threat. But the ordinary people who were paying the poll tax and who had funded this expensive operation didn't actually share that animosity towards the convoy at all, and yet they end up picking the bill for it.
We couldn't just sit there and take it. You know, we were going to sit back and just have them destroy our lifestyle. We'd worked so hard over the years to establish ourselves and become part of, you know, almost try to become part of society again by saying this can be a normal way of life. This, you know, there is nothing wrong with the way we want to live, please accept us. And we felt that we were in a way just beginning to reach that point with the wider society. And obviously the police and the state tried to stop us, and it was for that reason that I personally took action, because I wasn't going to sit back and let them take my lifestyle away from me that easily, irrespective of the rights and the wrongs of the actual issues on that day. Though obviously I felt the police were very wrong to have done what they did. But it wasn't that made me sue them, it was the fact that I wasn't sitting back and taking it. I'm a fighter.
Yeah, you can't stop.
You can't stop.
Running water.
Running water.
You can't kill.
You can't kill.
The fire that burns inside.
Fire that burns inside.
Don't deny.
Don't deny.
Our flesh and blood.
Our flesh and blood.
Don't forsake.
Don't forsake.
Our sons and daughters.
Our sons and daughters.
It's freedom of speech, as long as you don't say too much. But sooner or later we're gonna realize we're gonna meet up with the truth, face to face.